Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a fantastic guest in Zarina Stanford. And Zarina, you are a four-time B2B CMO. You're currently the CMO at Bazaarvoice. You are actually a trained journalist. That's in your background.
Yeah, that's what I was trained. Yes, in fact.
But I think that has a really good lens or filter that you now put on being a CMO. And specifically, not only just the activities as a CMO in that functional space, but part of what we want to talk about today is not accepting the status quo. Being a true business leader, you're part of the C-suite, right? That transitions that has more to do than just marketing and that functional expertise, but you have to take on a whole new role. So we're going to be exploring all of this today. But before we do that, if you wouldn't mind just maybe expanding a little bit more on your background so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Steve, for having me to begin with. I'm, as you said, Zarina Stanford. I have Lam in the middle of my name because I grew up in Hong Kong, growing up as a child, and Lam is my maiden name. In the Chinese heritage, education is really important. And for some reason, magically or another, I was not accepted to the Hong Kong University where I really, really wanted to study. But I also knew that I wanted to go to college. So I came upon, and then I landed myself in Texas, being trained as a journalist at the University of North Texas, for that matter. It is at the time the second best journalism school. And to your point, I mean, Steve, I think that coincidence of elements kind of set a few things where I'm really proud of, and I'm also known to be crazy about. So let me just, I'm just going to start with that one. May as well just admit it as upfront. Change is something that has no fear in my barometer. I mean, as a kid, I was a teenager. I got on a flight I've never flown before, and I landed in this world of unknown. But that's exciting. It's just like, how do we make the most out of it? I think that's one. And then truly being honest with you, I wanted to be in public relations, but I did not know at the time that public relations is a discipline of journalism. So then I got trained in my undergrad to really do this most profound thing that I do still every day. And I have to thank my Dr. Westmoreland, rest in peace. He really taught us big time, which is always ask the most critical question that would move the story forward. So if you think about, what does journalists do? They're there to tell. It's a story that could break ground. It's a story that could change the world, or it's a story about something as small as an ant, but yet it has a total relevance to all of us. And if I think about that and fast forward, every time when I'm in a marketing discipline or in my everyday, even in an earlier meeting today, it is about telling that story with impact and telling that story to those whom you want to be relevant to. And so the first thing is we have to do some discovery. We have to figure out, I remember being on campus, and it was the small campus, but all we were doing is like, we were all beat reporters, right? Because you're covering things on campus. And I remember all of us, like, as soon as the class over, you go, well, as soon as the assignment is over, not the class over, you start to think about, what is the next story that I want to break? And I remember him saying, and us as students saying, is how do we get our story to be on the front page of the newspaper? This is back in the days we still have newspaper. And that just ingrained in my head is that what is the most important thing that people would want to know, prompted or unprompted? And yet when they hear it, it's like, oh my gosh, either I didn't know about that. So that is so true. I am so violently against it. Whatever the reaction is, the idea is to stimulate the conversation. Now, as a student and as a journalist in the print space, I want my article to be on the front page. And as a CMO and as a business leader, I want Bazaar Voice to be up and being talked about by billions of shoppers everywhere. That's just what you aspire to do.
So I love this analogy, right? Think of like the headline getting onto the home page, right? Think about the subject lines and the emails we send out, right? And as many, channels as there are to the market these days, email marketing is still so incredibly important and pennies on the dollars for so much of what we do, right? We got to get that subject line in the email box to really jump out. And this is what I want to ask you from what you just talked about. Obviously, journalism, what you're creating is editorial, right? It's supposed to be unbiased. It's supposed to be the true reflection of the story that you're representing. The more that we can create marketing that feels like editorial, that feels unbiased, where we're educating our audiences, isn't that the better? Isn't that what we should be thinking about and striving for?
Absolutely. And Steve, if you allow me, I would take it even one step further, right? To editorial suggests that you have an opinion added to it already. Let's say that you're painting a painting, and right now it's just gray. But you have the moment when I think of the word editorial, well, I feel like blue today. I'm just going to paint it with a blue hue. That is already guiding what the audience may or may not see.
Yeah.
So I would say, as you were just talking about, wouldn't that be great if we could really just say it like it is, or, just report the factual elements of it? And if I may, this is why, being very honest with you, this is why I'm here in this role. This is why I chose to partner with Bazaar Voice, is this keyword of authentic and being authentic. So if we're talking about, we'll have another conversation about media coverage these days, but that's is another domain, in terms of of what's the news up and about. But I think that I still remember in that a journalism 301 or 201 class, when really most importantly that what they were teaching us is that as the holder of the pen or the typewriter for that matter, you have a responsibility. You have accountability to truly depict the story as is, which is why we chose not to be in the tabloid story, the media, but I dream of being a reporter at the USA Today at the time. And you wanted to report the factual elements. So fast forward, I joined Bazaarvoice just under 3 years ago. And I remember even in that, the recruiter conversation, as well as my first conversation with my boss, Keith Nealon, the CEO of the company, we talked about is that what is it that Bazaarvoice does that created the franchise that we have today, right? And just to give it a little bit of texture, a scale, roughly 2.3, 2.5 billion shoppers use our platform on a monthly basis. So there is something that is truly important to be responsible and to be accountable.
Yeah.
And being authentic and making sure that only authentic content or authentic elements are being represented, are being shown, is one of the other parallel that I draw myself as a student and as a professional today for what I do. And what my team does, and what my company does, and what my newspaper does for that matter. I think that, especially being trained, and I love in the brand space, in the communication space, in the DG space, and in the advocacy space, which is all that we do, right? A lot of this full spectrum that we do is taking true leverage of insights, because it has to be evidence-based, to be tracked, to be factual, to be thoughtful, and to be authentic. At the same time, we also need to make sure that kind of what you starting to lean into is that who are we talking to? And how do we filter that level of relevance that your article, that your whatever it is that you do is not going to go to nowhere land, but it's gonna make impact. The impact as a journalist could be changing the world. The impact as CMO, as my colleague here at Bazaarvoice, could be changing how how marketplaces and how consumerism is being done. Because of the single premise is that I think that, and we as a business too, the person who knows the customer the most is the customer. Is that
So
not just us?
I've got like 18 things I want to ask you. So here's one of the most important ones from what you're saying there. The idea of authenticity in editorial. We all know that we can't just come out of the gate selling our product, our tech, our solutions, right? Especially in a world where there's this B2B self-wire journey, right? And they don't even want to talk to us, right, until they've made most of their decisions. Right. So our goal is to get earlier in that buyer's journey, earlier in that conversation. But we're not going to be doing it by talking about us. We're going to be doing it by educating them, giving them points of view, being a consultant, being a colleague, right?
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be sellers. We're supposed to be there to help them solve their bigger picture. And that's why I like this idea of like consumerism, right? And how does Bazaarvoice play into the greater role, right, in solving the problems? So here's my question. In a USA Today or on CNN or any news outlet, they don't just talk about their own opinions. They bring in expert guests, right? They bring together the voice of the authority and package it and put it out to us, right? And some of our most highest performing campaigns are when the voice of the customer leads our voice. So I wanted to ask your opinion about that because that's like a basic tenet of journalism, right? And in
Absolutely.
providing authenticity is to bring the peer community of the customers that you're talking to, bring their voices together.
Yeah. Yeah, and Steve, I promise that we didn't plan me to call to ask that question or to put it that way, but that really truly is the entire premise of the whole Bazaarvoice business. Is that as consumers, let's not put ourselves as individuals. Forget about the businesses, forget about who you might be trying to buy, whatever it might be. I think in today's world, because information is so democratized, it's so available, even down to by the product level, because thank goodness for all the quote unquote journalists, as well as the content creators or the consumers who are willing to tell the world what they feel, think when they consume a particular product. And in our own study, we've been doing this on many years, and every year it continued to punctuate the same point, increasingly by percentages, by the way, as the consumers are telling us that they want to hear from other consumers first.
Yep.
That to me makes me feel really good on two fronts. Makes me feel very good as a consumer that my voice carry.
Yes.
It matters. Secondly, pragmatically, I just happen to be working for Bazaarvoice and it happen to be what we do. So wow, isn't that awesome that people truly rely on that organic set of content?
Yeah.
And in fact, I'll fast forward that in the last 2 years, we begin to ask the question, is that so, okay, you've been all saying that you want to hear from other consumers. Well, when do you listen to brands? Because brands are important, right? Because I mean, we all spend lots of our years and we'll continue to spend a lot of investment in the branded content. And their comment was that, well, they do look at it, in particular when it's later really trying to find more about a particular product of how it works potentially. However, they still lean to other consumers. And somewhere in between, they're even leaning to creators now. There is a whole another topic we can talk about is that how much do we trust, how much do we value content creators? From the consumer's angle, they actually value their input just like they are a friend, more so than a brand. So this is the part that consumers are shifting the entire. It's a paradigm shift. It's the entire way of looking is that if I'm a brand who is trying to get to the B2C space, I best think about how I'm going to leverage the billions because there are billions of them out there. And not just, and I usually talk about this sometimes, even with my own team, is that for us to create even a simple short blog, I'm going to just say, let's say it takes you 2 days. But you know what? For consumers so passionate about that product, it takes the person less than a minute because he or she can't wait to tell the world. And that piece of content is a lot more powerful than what you could do.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's kind of how, it's a realization to me too, Steve. I'm now all of a sudden reflecting on, wow, what I do to what I was trained to as a journalist has huge, huge relevance to each other. And all we're trying to do is to be relevant.
Absolutely. And so, you know, the audience for this podcast is B2B marketers, right? And so the consumer experience that you're talking about, and they're listening and validating their decisions based on what other consumers in their situation, that experience translates directly over to the B2B world. I might be a chief security officer and adding to my tech stack, and I'm reviewing B2B, partners or companies to see which one I'm going to hire.
Yeah.
I'm going to reach out to other chief security officers that have made the same decision before me and why, right?
Absolutely.
The expectations of the B2C world are now equal in the B2B world. And there's plenty of studies that have shown this, right?
Mhm.
So how does that then translate, right, into how do we as B2B marketers, how do we market? Well, bringing forth the voice of the peer community is a hugely important part of that.
Mhm.
Now, that means there's a premise that we have that peer to community, that's our ICP, right? And I know you have tons of opinions about our ACP. Do we know our ACP? How deeply do we need to know our ICP? How do we get involved with our ICP? Like, I just want to open up this ICP world and get your point of view on this.
Well, I love it. ICP is one of the most powerful acronyms in our industry. So if I could set the stage just a little bit, just to be fair, I am here as Bazaarvoice, as well as all my years in marketing, even including my 10 plus years of 15 years in sales, has always been in B2B. Because I really have not, other than probably the customers we serve, the businesses and brands that we serve here at Bazaarvoice is probably the closest. But even all the way back to my IBM days, we sell things to consumers, right? And you sell that through businesses. I think there are two things. There is no room to not always think about your customers first. No room. Whether is really identifying the true ICP, true ideal, right? Ideal means that is, if I can write the book, this is what it's going to be. But the market and the customers and the businesses or the individuals behind those businesses decide whether they are going to engage with you or not. I think that's the first thing that I even remember back in my sales days, and then I was asked to come run marketing. And I remember asking the question, why do you want a salesperson to come? And the question and the comment was, because you spend time with the customers every single day and every single hour. That for anyone who's listened to this podcast, or anyone who's even aspiring to be what we do, I think that would be the first thing I want to say is do a litmus test. How much time have you spent personally, face to face, and when it's afforded, in person, with individuals who represent cumulatively your ICP? Because nobody knows their pain more than themselves. And nobody knows the business that they're representing, the inside stories, the real crux of the matter, what were they really trying to solve for, as well as what great looks like. They have the in, we don't,
But
right?
why can't we rely on, we got all kinds of intent data and we got Zoom info, we got lots of data, right? Why do I have to spend time? That's time.
I love that. I love that. Okay, you're gonna keep asking that question to every single one who you interview in this series. You have to. There are two reasons behind it. One is that data is data and insights. Yeah, there are some that particularly leans on sentiment. At least today, we're still selling mostly to human. So the human to human contact and the understanding and the partnership and the relationship cannot be replaced. Ultimately, whether you're trying to sell, let's say you're trying to sell the biggest deal ever, you're not really just selling it based on pure facts. You're selling it also because of the relationship.
Mhm.
So therefore, I think, yes, one day soon we're going to be selling to AI. I think we're kind of partly doing that. But it's the emotional portion. It's the connections. It's what you said earlier. It's a sense of belonging to a community. That is so powerful. It's being the cohort, if you will. It's so powerful that I don't think not having that EQ side to put onto the IQ side would be a miss. Is that the only thing that matters? No, it's not. I would be the first one to tell you, if you don't have the data, I'm not even going to answer your phone
Right.
or answer the text or answer the LinkedIn or answer the Instagram or even the TikTok. Because you have to have something that is of value to offer. And then when I begin to have the conversations, and wow, there's something about here that is resonating to me as an individual, then all of a sudden it becomes personal. You know, in our trade and in our world, we talk about personalization. That cannot be just done by technology. You have to put a little bit of touch to it. And I don't know why I'm saying about it, but I'm going to just say it. About 2.5 months ago, our colleagues in Sydney was hosting, actually in Melbourne, was hosting a customer event. And they had a customer panel with 3 of our customers there. It's ingrained in my head, and I'm going to have to repeat it. What they were sharing is these are all, B2C brands. And what they're saying is that guess what? Consumers are tired of being sold to.
Yeah.
Consumers, and bring it to all of us now in the B2B space, we want to be inspired. We don't want to be just sold to. That is a human trait. And you have to be there and be present to sense that human trait. And so at the end of the day, marketing, businesses, it's all about people to people.
I have to tell you something. You can't see it on a podcast, but I kind of got goosebumps when you said we have to be inspired, right?
And they said that. I was just like so powerful. I just could not, I had it ingrained in my head. I said, I'm going to keep repeating that because this is not us saying it.
Right.
These are the individuals who are saying it. Don't just sell me, inspire me, make me want something.
And these are people that are, when you talk about the emotional side of this, there's usually large risks for a B2B buyer
Yeah.
to making a decision to buy something, go in a certain direction and say, this is where we're headed here, right? And so it's wrought with emotion. And what they don't want to be is nobody wants to be sold to. Have a conversation with me. Talk to me about like what are the, what's going on in the industry and how this fits in. And, Bazaarvoice isn't different than any other organization. The people that you're selling into in a B2B world, Bazaarvoice does not represent their entire job and
No.
responsibilities. You are a portion of it. But if we talk only to that portion, we're selling. We're only addressing the things that are important to us. And so therefore we're a seller. We're not a colleague, right?
Yes.
I've started, instead of like, we need to be trusted advisors, right? I've started calling it just, we need to be colleagues. Like,
Yeah.
how are we in this together? How are we helping each other?
Exactly.
How would we be a part of that community? If we could be a colleague versus a seller,
Yeah.
right? They're going to take that conversation. Like in this B2B world, the last thing we can do to get accelerated in the buyer's journey, because they want to wait till the end to talk to us, last thing we can do is talk more and more about us, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to spark. In fact, you'll love this one. It was out of an article in Fortune. They said content marketing solves problems. Thought leadership sparks conversations. We need to be sparking conversation,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not talking about our tech. That's not
Yeah.
talking about our products. There's a time and a place for that, right? But you're
I'm
not
glad
going to
you said
inspire
that.
somebody by doing that, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because there is absolutely a time and place for it. Because at the end of the day, most of us in the B2B space have something tangible to sell, to offer that will be there to create value. But the way we do that and how we do that and what we facilitate is an important part. As you were just saying that, you just reminded me of something, Steve. So I wanted to kind of bring that as an example. There's something in B2B that is truly evergreen. And I'm going to bring it back up again. And some of you may roll their eyes, but I'm just going to say it. That many, many years ago, whether it was whatever widgets that you happen to be selling, it's hardware, software, whatever it might be, the places where these colleagues and friends and cohorts hang is actually the user conferences.
Yeah.
Just the power of them, because all we're doing when we think about creating those community gathering, right? Let's just say, and I'm going to give it a 101 kind of term to just call that the user conference. You can call it whatever you want to go do, right? Whatever forces that might be bringing all these people together. What we're facilitating is that opportunity to have conversations.
Yes.
What we're also facilitating is for those who are really renegades and true game changers, have them inspire others who may not be as bold. I mean, I still remember I used to run events for the longest time because it's like the most, and it still often is, very, very converting, very producing, because you're trying to bring people together. And you always want to feature some that are poster child people. There may be only 1 out of 100 of them, maybe one even 1,000. But if you see that person and they just told you how they as a brand have done so and what they have done, and all of a sudden it becomes possible. That's one spectrum of the user conference. The other spectrum is the day-to-day. If I have to click 10 times to do this and you just told me you ticked only one time, well, you have to show me how you did it.
Yeah.
And that whole entire spectrum of conversations are facilitated in that common, self-selected, by the way, watering hole. That's very powerful. But they want to be there for whatever reason they want to be there for. And we as B2B marketers, sellers, companies, products, CTOs often even, we're there to help facilitate those sets of conversations.
It's really those conversations that unlock business growth, right? The whole topic that we started out is how do you not accept the status quo? How do you actually be a true business leader, not just a marketing leader? Sustainable business growth. Our greatest competitive advantage as a company is knowing our customers, our ICP better than our competition, so we can help them. We can be those colleagues, right? And so that to me is like my big takeaway from this whole conversation is to break out of the functional role of marketing, because knowing your ICP has tremendous impact on product, tremendous impact on operations, tremendous impact on sales, has tremendous impact on every aspect of the business. That's how you actually become a true business leader.
Yeah.
And Gartner even asked us 2 years ago as CMOs, you need to be more chief customer officers. You need to understand your customer. And that's your rightful place as a business leader at the table.
I think this is an interesting part, and I absolutely want to double score on that too, is that I think to some extent, if we think of ourselves as only a discipline and discipline only therein, we're only as big as what the discipline is. But every day, whether you're thinking about what's the next brand strategy or whether you think about how do I drive growth, and in our case, we always go all the way to how do I get all the way to bookings and revenues. That's the conversation not only the CMO does, the CRO, the CFO, the CIO, the CEO, especially your board talks about. So when we begin to have those kind of conversations, by no default, you just will be elevated to a much higher stature in terms of able to drive whatever the business objective that your business is trying to drive. And therefore, I think, and being a fellow of the Marketing Academy, this is one thing that we often talked about as a phenomenal organization that I just dearly thankful for and be a part of, is that we always talk about the fact is that we can choose the language of business. And if we think about ourselves as a discipline, our language of business may be conversion, maybe MQLs, maybe, but guess what? The rest of the business don't talk that way. We need to change right? You talk about ROI, you talk about revenue, you talk about ultimate, loyalty, and you talk about the impact that your solution or what have you that you do for the business that you just had a partnership with. That's a business conversation. And that would take a long way because a business conversation is a partnership conversation and not a transactional conversation.
I want to go for another couple hours because I love this conversation. But if you were to put into a 30-second soundbite what you think is the single most important takeaway that you want your peers that are watching or listening to this podcast to have from listening in here today, what would that be?
Can I have 4? Start with the 3 most important thing first. Number 1, and I say that always, is being relevant. It's the same conversation we talk about, right? Being relevant to the business, being relevant to the board, being relevant to the ICP, being relevant to that consumer. Number 1. Number 2 is, especially in supporting and revenue supporting functions like in marketing, get things done. You cannot argue with impact. You cannot argue and disagree with absolute value that through the voice of your consumers or your customers, they're saying, wow, that's powerful. And the third that I also always accompany that is you have to have fun. You have to believe in what you do, and you have to have fun doing what you do. Now I'm going to round it all out. In doing so, I'm going to say the 4th thing, which is the encompassing thing, is that think big, be bold, because little step changes isn't going to make it. We got to think really, really big. And there's no other discipline, and now I'm going back to specifically discipline. In my opinion, there's no other discipline that has the bragging right, the ability, and the possibility to truly crafting as well as delivering what this big, bold thing can be. Imagine all the brands that you admire. Imagine all the people whom you have admired. If they're in our space, I guarantee you one of the common thing is they were big, they were bold, and they spoke up.
I love that one thing. Well, I will say, the third one was have some fun, and I hope we had some fun, and I hope we had a good conversation for the audience here today. I know we did, but I know there's going to be people that have questions and additional questions. Would it be appropriate that I gave out a link to your LinkedIn profile that
Please
people
do.
can reach
Yeah,
out to you?
absolutely. Absolutely. You can kind of, absolutely. I love this kind of conversations. I love this kind of inspirational debate conversations, and there's so many more to have. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing all of this. And I love the roots in journalism and what we learned from that. Thank you for coming on and sharing all the insights. I'd love to have you back on the show again
Well,
soon.
thank you. Well, count on it. And Steve, it's great talking with you as well, too. I love the free flow. Thank you for accommodating.